Should be recording now. Today, I I don't know, how did I end up talking about short sales? Well, I was asked. I also know that the some of the different kinds of trainers and things like that, and podcasters and pundits and things like that in real estate are talking about short sales again. And so, since that is a thing and it's in the news, I thought I would spend some time reminiscing sort of about what short sales are. And they do not involve short people, by the way, nor do they involve, shorts in that sense. And how does that fit into what you might want to do as a real estate agent in terms of generating leads and business and that sort of thing? Now, there's a handout which I pasted at least once. I may need help if somebody would, maybe when others join, they might, and they're saying, where's the handout, right? Back in, I heard a great line the other day. I've spent the last few days in Scottsdale, Arizona at an EXP masterminds thing. Anyhow, and I heard a great quote. And the quote is that buyers think the market is 2006, right? And sellers think that the market is 2023. And one of the challenges is there's a whole bunch of real estate agents who don't know the difference between those two markets, right? They, because they're really new, right? And they don't remember. But back in 2006, something happened where the values of property in California started to go down. And what we were doing prior to the values going down is what was called, well, creative financing. And what creative financing involved is 100% financing. Yeah, right? Forget 80% first, 20% second, 100% financing. No, these were called ninja loans. No income, no job, no assets. Right? They were called liar loans. All you had to do is lie and tell them that you made a lot of money and they'd give you a loan. I can remember selling a fourplex, and my clients are talking to the loan agent, and the loan agent is calculating, and the loan agent points at the calculator and says, this is the number you need to write down for your income in order to buy this fourplex. And the couple looked at each other and laughed, and they said, wouldn't that be wonderful if we made that much money? And they wrote it down and got the loan. What could go wrong, right? What could go wrong? Well, the reason they were doing this is because everyone knows that real estate in California only goes up, it never goes down, right? Isn't that true? Only up, 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 up. And so, everybody was betting prices would just rise, there'd be appreciation, and, what do we have to worry about? And then, prices went down. And because of the over leverage, there were a lot of houses that were underwater in that they owed more money than the house was now worth. Now, the lenders reacted to this in a variety. They had short-term reactions and long-term reactions, and they don't get themselves in that situation as much as they used to, right? It's not as easy, but also not impossible, right, to be underwater. So if you have a 95% loan and the market goes down enough, that may not be covered with closing costs when you sell the house. So at that point, back in 2007 and in 2008, over half of all the listings in the MLS, and I was in Silicon Valley then still, in our MLS, over half of all the listings that were in the MLS were short sales, notices of default, bank-owned properties. Over half, right? So those of us that lived through that got good at short sales. And because that was, that's what was happening. So are they coming back? Well, let's take a look at my, I do have a handout on it. And so let me see if I can figure out where it is. I'll move it over here, up there. And, oh, So, um, if the property, I'll play it straight. We'll go through this the way it's supposed to be. All right. So, what we're going to cover today, there's some new laws that affect short sales, notices of default, went into effect rather recently. We're going to talk about that. What do we do when we're in this? What are some of the financial things that we have to look at? Ethical considerations, there's some special forms, and some sort of strategic insights, right? Which I'm going to, there, in a way, you could say, and by the way, the internet says that short sales are on the rise, foreclosures are on the rise, bank-owned properties are on the rise. Well, uh, I guess. But if it's really, really, really low and it comes up some, then it's rising, but it's still really, really low. And so that's pretty much where we are right now. And the reason that this is low is that there's a lot of equity. So it used to be back in the 2006, 7, 8, 9, right, when all that fun was happening, it used to be that the issue was you couldn't sell your house and pay off a loan, right? Because the closing costs and real estate, everything, you could not sell the house and pay off the loan. And if that's true, then you would need to do a short sale, which means you need to go to the lender, to use the old phrase, hat in hand, and ask them sheepishly if they would let you sell the property, even though they're not going to get all the money back that they lent. Now, by the way, you might be surprised to learn that lenders originally said, no way, right? What do you mean sell the house and not pay us? No way. You pay us off or you don't sell, you don't pay. Then, and you see, there's a difference between short sales and pre-foreclosure, right? Which is a distinction I don't know how clearly I made in the materials, but I just want to make sure we understand that there's a difference. Short sale means you're selling a house and you need the lender's consent because you can't pay off 100% of the loan. That does not mean you're in foreclosure. In fact, it's best if you're not in foreclosure. And what do I mean by in foreclosure? I mean a notice of default has been recorded against your property, or a notice of sale has been recorded. And we're going to explain what those mean. But you see, at that point, you're in foreclosure, which, by the way, oftentimes makes it harder to sell the property, particularly at full market value. Because as soon as you slap the pre-foreclosure notice of default label on a house, who is attracted? Well, investors are, right? They're looking for a deal. So if you know that you're, you're missing payments, right, or you're struggling to make payments, and you contact the lender and you say, look, this isn't going to work. Isn't going to work, right? Now, some lenders actually require that there be a default prior to them considering a short sale. But some of them wised up and said, no, it's probably better for us to sell it not as a foreclosure property, get the most money we possibly can, and then take maybe a little bit of a loss, then dragging it through the foreclosure process. Does everybody see there's a difference between it being, and a lot of properties are in foreclosure, but they're not a short sale because there is enough equity to pay off the loan, and you can have a short sale when you're not, you get the idea, all right? So, current levels remain below pre-pandemic peaks. It's a market normalization, not a collapse. Of course, we don't know what things are going to be like in the future. There are certain cities in California that are generally called out as being, eligible maybe to see a wave of short sales. Bakersfield, Riverside, Stockton, Chico are having more distressed activity. By the way, can you as a real estate agent see, are there more notices of default, notice of sale, things like that? The answer is yes. You have software that'll show you, not necessarily statistics, that would require asking AI maybe, But RPR also allow you to search for foreclosure properties, which means notices of default, notices of sale, auctions and things like that. Right? And you can see how many are there in your area. Timeline. Somebody misses a payment. Not good, but nothing officially really happens. You don't make a second payment. Really not good. But still, you're getting, strongly worded letters. You miss a third payment. Now it's getting a little bit more, you miss four payments. Now they're done, right? So the federal underwriting guidelines say that the lender has to wait 120 days from when there's the first delinquency in order to begin the foreclosure process. In other words, they don't record a notice of default because you're 1 or 2 or even 3 months delinquent. They wait until you hit 4. Once you're at 120 days, legally, they record the notice of default. Now, this point, it becomes visible to just about everybody. Because RPR has it, Realist has it, Property Radar has it, PropStream has it. There's Google search that you'll find that there's all these programs because this is recorded and therefore there's software that can pull them all up. And of course, that means that other real estate agents know about them too, as do all these investors that you see on YouTube, and the swarm starts to appear. Right. So if you wanted to know strategically, where would you want to focus, if you could, your marketing efforts? Let's just call it that. It's in that 120-day period before the notice of default. Because once the notice of default is recorded, now the world knows, right? And all the competition. And by the way, even in the 120-day period, there's still competition. It's just not as intense. Now, if you're wondering, well, how would I know? Because what I just said, if to break it down, is that you ought to contact people who have missed payments but are not in default. And you might be wondering, well, how is that even possible? And the answer is people sell lists, and who knows that they are 4 months or 3 months or 2 months or even 1 month would be best. Who knows that they've missed a monthly payment on their mortgage? Well, the credit bureaus know. And the credit bureaus will release that information for, there's a fee. But they only want to negotiate with, loan agents, not real estate agents. And if you're wondering, well, why wouldn't they want to work with a real estate agent? I mean, just think about it, But loan agents have the ability maybe to offer them some sort of a refi or something, right? And so they used to consider this, I haven't checked recently, as a legitimate use, and they would sell the list. Now, before you're thinking, well, wait a second, give me the list, right? No, just settle down, right? Because what is oftentimes lacking is a plan, right? First of all, the list, this is not for the faint of heart, right? You understand? And there are laws regulating what you can do with that list. But what I mean by the faint of heart, so what do real estate agents want from all of this, right? What do we want in short sales? What do we want in pre-foreclosures? What do we want? And the answer is pretty obvious. We want listings, right? We want closed transactions, but we're really doing this because we want listings. A short sale is a listing sale, right? I want a listing. Right. So what the message that real estate agents generally send to people that are in, delinquent and or in default is, I want to sell your house. You got to sell your house. I can sell your house. We can sell your house and you can maybe pay off your loan. Maybe you won't pay off your loan. I can sell. Now, the challenge with that message is that it is absolutely the opposite of what the prospect wants. What does the homeowner want? They want to keep the house. That's what they want to do. That's what they want to do. What do we want? We want them to sell the house. So our message is about what we want. We want to sell your house, rather than making the message about what they want, which is to keep the house. Now, if you're wondering what would that look like, so we had a website as well as, marketing materials. But what the message was is we can show you how to keep your house. Don't lose your home to foreclosure. You have options. Fight. I can help. And you'll see in my handout, I go through some of the different ways. There's loan modification, there's restructuring. HAFA is this big program. You can try deeds in lieu of foreclosure. You can, right? There's this whole list of stuff that you can try. The reality is that none of those things actually work. Hardly ever. Right? And all of those loan modification, let's use the big one, the starting point of loan modification and short sales is you need to have a valuation of the property. You need a real estate agent to go and do what we call a CMA. Now the lender is untrusting, so the lender will eventually send at least usually 3 other real estate agents to do what's called a broker price opinion, a BPO, which is their own CMAs, to see if it matches your CMA. Just to make sure you're not lying to them. But the beginning point of loan modification and or a short sale is the lender wants some evidence as to what the property is probably worth right now. They have their own software, but they want you to they want real estate agents to throw their opinions in the ring. I don't know. So the process of doing loan modifications or all of that involve things that you could be helpful with, and what will generally occur is it's not going to work. They're not going to be happy with the loan modification. They'll be up against the wall and they'll sell. And because you're the one that's been helping them. I mean, by the way, people would say, well, wait a second, why are you doing this? Because if we do modify our loan, then we're not going to sell it. And if we're not going to sell it, then you're not going to list it. And if you don't list it, you're not going to get a commission. So why are you doing this? And the answer was, well, look, we want to help you keep your home. And if we are successful in helping, if you're successful in keeping your home, I expect that you're going to tell your friends and your family what a great job we did, and see if there's anyone, if you ever hear of anyone that wants to buy or sell a house, you're going to tell them about how great we were and how much we helped you, right? And we also know that it doesn't always work out. The loan modifications, and at some point you might need to sell your house, at which point we'll be there to help you at that stage. But right now we're concentrating on getting you a loan modification so you can keep your house, okay? Now, does everybody understand that that kind of a conversation is, well, a lot easier to have than I want to sell your house? And the metaphor that I use when I'm explaining this process is you have minnows that eventually grow into salmon. The minnow is the person who's missed a month or 2, right? That's where, as they move through this system, they become bigger, right? In the sense that their need to sell their home is going to go up. All right, so we have the first 4 months. Right, we have the first 4 months where they're delinquent. Then we hit what's called, then there's the notice of default. It's recorded, the NOD, and then there's 3 months, 90 days, that the borrower has to pay up to make up missed payments. And if they do that, they have reinstated the loan. Everything is cool. We just keep moving forward. Let's say they don't. Now, you understand that 3-month period is more than enough time to sell the house and close, right? You see, I mean, there's enough time in here that you could sell the house and close, but what if they don't? And if you're wondering, well, why would they? A lot of the people that are in this situation are not thinking clearly. When was the last time I did one of these? 2020. right? That's the last time I did one of these. Notice of default, notice of sale. That's coming next. So the notice of default is in 90 days. And by the way, as soon as that happens, it actually changes the forms you're supposed to use because there's protections against sellers from being ripped off by investors when their home is in pre-foreclosure. And so there's a notice of default purchase agreement. Ugh, yeah, that's another purchase agreement class. All right, so then we have the notice of sale. It's also called the trustee sale. It's also called an auction, and it's 21 days, 4 months delinquent, 3 month reinstatement, 3 weeks notice of sale. And at the end of that 3 week period, they hold an auction. Now, just so you understand, because I have a lot of investors that are always saying, oh, I want to buy, I want to buy foreclosure properties, make a killing, right? I worked with investors who did this, right? It's not as easy as it sounds because, okay, we all through this process, they still haven't sold their home, haven't negotiated with the lender. We're at the auction, right? First of all, you have to understand if you're the investor, no transfer disclosure statement. No selling property questionnaire. No, usually no property inspection, no termite inspection, no roof inspection, no nothing. You may not even have a preliminary title report. One of the most common questions I get from investors is, how do I get a prelim? And Melissa is here. And I tell them you have to pay the title company. Usually it's $500 or more. That may be a low or a high number, but you'd have to buy one. Right, there's no transaction going on. And even then, that's not exactly the same thing as title insurance, right? And so you're buying this property without all of the normal documentation that somebody would have when they're buying a property, right? You don't get all of that. And the guy that I used to work with, he figured that 1 out of 4 times he was going to lose money. Right, because there's some of the people, some of the borrowers, which you understand, the borrower isn't happy, right? They don't want to go. They're losing their house. They're not going to get any money. They've been making mortgage payments for a couple of years. They're not getting a dime back. Some of them have been known to pour cement down drains and in toilets and let wild animals. You understand? They're not necessarily keeping it in pristine condition. So usually you get to go look at the property the day before and then you get to bid, right? And I'm not going to go through that. That's a whole nother class. But let's just say the opening bid is the amount of the first and the cost of sale. And if no one bids the amount of the first and the cost of sale, somewhat metaphorically, but somewhat real, the auction looks at the lender and ask them, what do you want to do? And the lender's choices are, give us the house. At that point, it becomes REO, real estate owned by the bank. And they call it that because in the bank's financial statements, there's a category that says real estate owned, REO, and all the properties that the bank owns are listed there, and they would go on that list. Which is, by the way, not necessarily what the bank wants. Right? They don't necessarily want to own a house because then they're going to have to list it and sell it. And, they're limited as to how many of them they can own, and they don't really want, it's not their thing. The option number 2 for the bank is to say, well, forget it. Well, there's actually 3 options, but option number 2 is forget it. We're going to just let it go for now, and maybe we'll bring it up again later. One of the frustrating things for investors trying to buy at a foreclosure auction is they get canceled all the time, they get rescheduled, and nobody knows why. It just happens a lot because the lender knows they're not going to get the most money possible at that auction. They know it. They would rather sell it outside of the auction. Right? Does everybody understand why now short sales start to become more popular? Because if there isn't enough money to pay off the loan, the lender isn't going to benefit from going to the full foreclosure or owning the property themselves. That's not really going to help them. And so they're far more likely to negotiate a short sale, particularly when they think they're going to lose a lot more money if they go to the auction. The general rule of thumb, by the way, is you lose 20% at the auction, right, of the value, 20%. It's the rule of thumb. Why is an 80% loan doesn't have PMI, which is to protect, it's a foreclosure protection. Why? Because 20% down is enough of a buffer to cover the fact that the property may not sell for full market value if they foreclose. So the lender's figuring out how much am I going to lose if we take it to the foreclosure process versus, well, why don't we just take a little bit less now and sell it as a real normal sale? Because then we may have somebody buy it that's not an investor. So AB 2424 went into effect last year, one of the more newer laws. There's a 45 to 90 day postponement when there's an active MLS listing or an accepted purchase contract. Yes. Stops the monster for a while. Now, I'm not saying I personally would ever do something like this, but let's just say back in the day, if the clock is running out and there's a notice of sale is coming up and I heard that this was done, you would get a friend, let's say an investor friend, to write an offer that had no deposit and all the contingencies and send it to you, and then we accept that offer and we give it to the lender, and then the lender would stop the foreclosure. Right? Now, they didn't have to back then, but if a contract existed, they would stop and some of them would, some of them wouldn't. Well, now it's actually part of the law that if the property gets listed, if it gets listed, or if it's under contract, they postpone the foreclosure to give the owner an opportunity to sell. They've also changed the floor. So how low could somebody bid? They've actually raised that sum. Also, if there's tenants and community organizations that want the house, this is a anti-investors from elsewhere policy. So rather than letting the Blackstone, and by the way, most of these are not necessarily going to that, but Blackstone and some other companies buy a lot of these properties and they're just a big corporate investor, and they're going to hold it and not necessarily put anyone in it and then eventually try and sell it for a profit. This is saying that people that want to live in the property or the community organizations get a shot at it. Which, notice, as I put it here, it's more time and leverage for agents to negotiate alternatives. Right, because you have even a little bit of a buffer before and after. What could we do? Well, we would talk to them. This is what we had on our website: loan modification, forbearance agreements, short sales, deed in lieu. We would, and if this really does pick up again, I'll make a new website if you're on my team that you can use. But if we're not there yet. But one of the things we would do is make arrangements so that they could talk to a bankruptcy lawyer or a CPA for an hour. Part of our value package was a free 1 hour consultation with a bankruptcy lawyer or a CPA. Now, by the way, the ones that we referred them to would have given them an hour consultation anyhow, but it certainly looks good. And we would get all the loan modification stuff, and they would fill out this little, form that said, I want to keep my house, show me how to modify my loan so I can still live here. And they give you the information, and you send them this ebook, which is basically the government information on loan modification, and they're now in your database, and away we go. Right? And we could use any software like the Brevity software or KV Core, Lofty, and create a landing page, and then anyhow. So those were different things we could do. We would have a website, but you get the idea. These are the different options that you would need to know something about. Now, if the short sale process itself is a little tricky in that if you're the agent, usually on the loan, And the lender isn't going to deal with you unless there's this authorization from the owner of the property. And we had, and even CAR has pieces of this, our own package for the authorization to allow us to negotiate the short sale. But many lenders had their own forms. Some would use our forms, but at some point you have to get permission, right, to negotiate with the lender. By the way, if you're on my team, a value that you could add is that I've actually done this many times in the past because I'm old, right? And the whole process of what do you say and what do you do and what are they looking for and all of that. The asset managers that are the ones that are actually handling this. They're going to want a financial package, right? They want to make sure you really can't afford it. There's a lender package. Now, notice it would include the short sale addendum. We're going to look at that, and other documents might be part of it. There will be BPOs, broker private price opinions, where they're going to see if you're telling the truth about when you think the property is right. And then notice it says allow 1 to 3 months minimum for a lender review and approval. They don't decide right away, right? And you have to keep telling people that we're waiting, nothing's wrong, it takes a long time. Sorry it's taking so long. Nothing we can do about it. No, they don't want us to bug them. We can't call them every day. It'll just make them angry. We just have to wait. It's a big bureaucracy. Those are, you see, I've given you the script, right? So what do you say when your clients are asking what's going on? So during this time, you have to educate them and you have to, help them. And there are a lot of scams. Some of the laws that came into existence were as a result of all the people that were finding ways of ripping off people that were in distress. Because they're looking for some sort of a lifeline, some sort of a solution. And I'll give you an example of one of those when we get to the different forms, which we are right now. So required, let me just do this. All right. Um, I'll edit it. I can't go on doing this. So let's start. See, required isn't necessarily true, but what I've done here for y'all, and I did this way because some of you will figure this out at some point. If you go into Zip Forms and you go to the California Association of Forms library, you type in the word short, you're going to see all the forms that involve short sales or short-term rentals. Right. And so I put them in here. And if you type in the word default, you're going to find the notice of default purchase agreement. So I put links of them here so that you could, I'm not hiding them from you. If you go into the CAR library for letters, which you do have, right? When you log into Zip Forms, drop down, there's more than just CAR forms as a library. They have pre-foreclosure kinds of letters and things like that. But let's start with the listing agreement. All right. All right. So I don't need Gemini. Yes, I like it that Gemini reads it for me. But this is a addendum that we would include with a listing. So on the residential listing agreement at the end, there's a bunch of boxes you can check for various other forms that could be included. One of them is the short sale addendum, listing addendum, and you would check the box, and here it is. It explains what a short sale is. It talks about alternatives to short sales. Notice how that list looks a lot like mine, plus the discussion of bankruptcy. It also discusses the lender agreement. So buyers would think, short sale, notice of default. We've got an owner in distress, right? We got somebody financially on the rope, probably desperate. We're going to be able to just wring a great deal out of them. Okay. Well, the challenge with that approach is that you're not dealing with the homeowner, right? You're not dealing with the homeowner, you're dealing with the bank. And the bank is not in distress, right? They're not financially on the ropes. They're not in a particularly big hurry either. And when, think about this, go to your bank, and this will be the goal. Talk them out of $50,000, right? Prepare a script, give them good reasons, go try it, right? Security will drag you out in a relatively short period of time. You might think, well, that's crazy. The bank isn't going to just give me $50,000. Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, they're reluctant to do that, aren't they? Right. So the idea that they're going to just jump on this and do it, you need the lender's approval. And the lender may change the price, the lender may change the commission, the lender may do whatever the lender wants to do. Because if you don't get the lender's permission, you don't get the short sale. Now, if you're a real estate agent, you can write down in the residential listing agreement any number you want, 10%, anything, write it down, 5, 3, whatever. Yeah, good luck. Because that listing agreement is going to be subject to the lender's approval. And they're probably not going to accept that. And they'll tell the owner, why don't you get another agent? Now, at the beginning, when all this started happening, it was really awful because the lenders took the position, since they weren't getting any money, neither should the seller. So their first rule is sellers had to get nothing. Well, if the seller's getting nothing, the seller doesn't have really that much of they're not enthusiastic about signing documents. Let's just say. Right. So if the current owner doesn't get something, then why even sign a listing agreement? Why sign a purchase agreement? Why bother with all of that? You're already in default. Your credit's already taken a hit. Why you just won't sign anything? You'll just walk away, and now the lender has to go all the way to the foreclosure sale and all that, which, as I mentioned, they don't really want to do. So then they decided, okay, we'll give the seller like $3,000. Right, that number may have gone up or down since then. But they said, okay, we'll give you a few $1,000s if you're the owner, if you'll just sign stuff. Right, but you understand part of the issue with this is how much is that owner, if anything, going to get as a result of the short sale? And it's probably not a lot, but that's part of what the negotiation with the lender is about. Continuing liability of the debt. Yeah. Borrowers are concerned about whether the borrower's relief from any further value or letter any unpaid balance, some referral as deficiency judgment is the random balance. My judgment is often deficient. I have deficiency judgment a lot. But what a deficiency judgment is, it's called a recourse loan. It's where the lender, remember they were doing 100% financing, but let's say the lender lent you $800,000 and the market went down, right? And your property is now only worth $700,000. That's $100,000 deficiency. Now, the amount that the lender can, so the lender is given two choices. That $100,000, they could go to a trustee sale, right? Which you might think that was a long process, but it takes 4 months. And you can hold the trustee sale and you get what you get. That's option number one for the lender. But if you do the trustee sale, the lender only gets what the lender gets. And if the lender doesn't get anything, then that's it. It's all over. It's all over, right? The trustee doing the sale does not have the power to attach other assets of the borrower. They don't have that legal power to do that. All right. So that's the trustee sale. What's the other option? Judicial foreclosure. Oh, get a lawyer. Go to court. Get a judgment. Now, the judgment, you see the way this would go if you were the borrower, metaphorically speaking, the way it would go if you were the borrower is they'd be saying, well, now, did you actually get $800,000 from the lender? Yeah. Did you sign this note right here that said that you received $800,000 and you promised to pay it back? You remember signing it? I don't remember that. So you got the money. You promised to pay it back. Are you paying it back? No, I'm not paying it back anymore. Okay. So you're not disputing that you owe $800,000, correct? You're not disputing that. All right, now we've sold your house and we got 750. Where's the other 50? And then they can go after, do you own a business? Do you have assets? Do you have a retirement account? Do you have any investment properties? What do you got? And that judgment would be used to lien other properties and force their sale in order to satisfy the deficiency of that loan. However, California has a rule that says that if it's a purchase money loan, and a purchase money loan is a loan to purchase property secured by the property being purchased. If it's a 1 to 4 unit residential property, owner occupied by the borrower, 1 to 4 units, loan to purchase, no deficiency judgment is allowed in California. See, the idea here is the bank probably knew more about this than you did. First time home buyer, who's sophisticated? Well, the bank is way more sophisticated. Now, you're probably all going to find this incredibly difficult to believe, but let's say there was a time when banks would lend people more money than they knew they could afford on a property they knew wasn't worth that much, hoping they'd go into default so they could take the farm, the business, and other assets as well. I know you're going to say, well, that would never have happened, right? Well, it did. So they basically said, if you're Bank of America, if you're a lender and you're lending people to buy property, money to buy property, you better figure out what that property's worth. Because if you lend them more money than that property is worth, their 1 to 4 units, owner occupied residential property, if you lend them more money than that property is worth, you can go to trustee sale and you can take the property, but you cannot sue them for any more money. You already understand that. I hate to do this, but anyhow, I can't stop myself. So they refinance. What happens if they refinance? Is the refinance a purchase money loan? Is the refinance a loan to purchase property secured by the property being? No, it's a loan against property already got. Oh, well, now there's, under some circumstances, they could go after you for a deficiency. So the question as to whether or not on this particular property is there liability for a future deficiency might matter on whether or not it's a purchase or a non-purchase money loan. Now, by the way, if you're on my team, I do not want you explaining this to people. Get me, I mean, if this does come up, I can explain it, but they should talk to a lawyer. Does everybody understand we're getting into serious things here? But if it's obviously it was a purchase money loan, lenders generally don't want to do deficiency judgments anyhow, because by the time you pay for the lawyers and all the other problems, there really isn't necessarily a lot left over. So notice it goes into what my rant just did. Purchase money, loans given by lenders, 1 to 4 units, one of which is occupied. There's anti-deficiency protection. You may notice, those of you that are refinanced, they ask more questions on the refi about other assets. And I've had people say, why? Because that all might be security for the loan. Refinance liens. Notice it says, I should have read ahead. Anti-deficiency protections are less clear for loans that are refinanced. They generally lose their purchase money status. However, in 2013, they changed the law and they allowed, if you refinance a purchase money loan, they consider it still a purchase money loan. But, this gets complicated. Junior liens, that's also somewhat unclear. Does the second have the right to sue? Maybe, right? And it says the law is not entirely clear, but HELOCs and things like that might be able to sue for money afterwards, right? Credit and tax consequences, they're going to treat a short sale just like pretty much like a foreclosure, right? It's going to, I mean, you can, we have people online that will correct me if I'm wrong, but it's treated, I think, pretty much like you were foreclosed on in terms of your credit, that sort of thing. If you need to seek tax advice, there's a reason why we have bankruptcy lawyers and CPAs. If you borrowed $800,000 and you short sale it, and the lender only gets 750, so that there's a $50,000 deficiency, that's the short. That $50,000 could be considered to be a form of mortgage relief, which is a type of taxable income. Yeah.
Michael, they had said with a short sale when this was happening during the recession that a short sale did not impact your credit, whereas a foreclosure did. I don't know if that's been changed since then, but that was one of the reasons that people were more inclined to do short sales during that time so that it did not impact. And also, I believe that with a short sale, um, as you said, in the 1 to 4, people did not, there was no, I'm sorry, I don't know all the proper words. People could not, the banks, the lenders could not come back on you for residual.
Right, that's on a short sale. You're correct about the credit. My many of the times there was a notice of default also. And once the notice of default hits, you're pretty much in a different category. But you're correct. If you can sell it without the NOD.
Doesn't a notice of default and NOD affect the property? It goes, it's registered with the county, but I didn't think it affected the credit of the people.
But
Could you
all,
clarify?
but all, if I've had a few notices of default on my house, does that affect my credit?
It will go to credit reporting. So when someone pull the credit, it will show that this mispayments and um, notice of defaults.
And that affects credit score.
Uh,
And
that's a good question.
I
That will
promise not
affect
to do this
that
to him.
that will affect but not a big number, but that will affect like -5 points or something. But it
Yeah.
will show up on the report. That is a big thing that for the
Right.
lender. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And so then it talks about improprieties, right? And one of the forms, if we go back to my forms, one of the forms is this MARSSN, which is the reason I put it here is because people ask me questions about it, because it's about being a short sale negotiator. And the question I usually get asked is if I'm if I'm a listing agent in a short sale, am I a short sale negotiator? And the answer is yes, in a functional sense, because you're negotiating a short sale. Are you legally a short sale negotiator? And the answer is no, not if you have a listing agreement. Now, you might be thinking, well, why would a real estate agent be helping somebody with a short sale if they don't have a listing agreement? Remember the word improprieties? Because real estate agents would charge like thousands of dollars to help somebody submit a short sale package. People who didn't have enough money to make their mortgage payment. And they weren't necessarily listing it, they were simply helping them submit and you have to use this form. If you're doing that, if you actually have a listing, you don't have to do that. The short sale addendum, which has some of the same material that was in the short sale listing addendum, is a explanation and what you're considering. This is the way I explain this very quickly to somebody is we're negotiating with a lender. We're negotiating with a particular department of a lender. It's in their risk management department. They're usually located in another state in a different time zone. They're a big bureaucracy. They've got lots of these going on. So it doesn't really matter whether the seller accepts our offer or not, because the lender has to accept it. And if we present the offer today and the seller accepts it, that's all nice, but it really doesn't mean anything until the lender has accepted the short sale package, which, by the way, they often don't do right away. So they might say, well, the price you had in mind is too low. The commission you're paying the agent is too high. Now, they're not usually cutting it down to ridiculous levels, but if you're thinking of just tacking on a few extra points because it's a pain in the rear short sale, they're not probably going to go for that. They're not happy about the short sale either. But that's the big explanation. Until we get the lender's consent, we don't have anything. Now, could they still be looking at other properties? The answer is yes. Could they make an offer on another property? The answer is yes. What would we do? We would cancel this one. It happens, right? Because there's no necessarily guarantee that the lender is going to accept our offer. Now, if you're saying, well, can't the listing agent find out in advance? But no, they're not going to tell them. You understand that if you call the lender, the risk management department up, and you say, look, yeah, we were thinking 800. What's the lowest you would let us sell this house for? But they're not. No, that's not the game. The game is to get as much as you possibly can, and then they'll tell you whether it's enough or not. Right? That's the game. So go do your best. Bring us what you got, and we'll let you know. And they're not in a particular hurry. They're just not. Now, by submitting stuff, it generally stops the foreclosure process if you're in foreclosure, but you get the idea. That this is the whole part of this from the buyer's point of view that's a problem, right? That's a problem. And it says, shall be delivered. Notice, the deposit check. 3 business days after buyer short sale lender's consent, 2B and 2F. All right. So 2B and 2F is a document from the lender saying we're consenting. So you don't put your deposit money into escrow until the lender, everybody waits, right? Until the lender approves it and we get the consent, and then we move forward. Then you put in your deposit money. That's when contingency periods start to run. Usually in the short sale, the seller doesn't pay for anything, right? No termite report property, and they usually don't do that because they don't have any money and the lender doesn't want to pay for it. They just don't do it. They don't like to negotiate repairs and things like that. The lenders don't. There's no assurance of lender approval. Costs, they may incur costs. The lender may not want to do what is customary in your area. They may not care that we're in Santa Clara County, which is a seller pay county for title and escrow. They may not care. They say, we're not going to pay for it, So all of that, you're dealing with the lender, right? So the notice of default, this is something that hopefully you're not going to use, but it's essentially, I guess that link didn't go anywhere. Let me, it didn't go anywhere. I must have put in the wrong link for notice of default. For those of you that would like to read it, you could go to CAR, zip forms, type in the word default like I did. And I'm doing this on purpose to make you go look for it. Distress sales. I had somebody ask me today how would they find recent versions of the forms. This is why I drink so much. I have no idea where you'll find the recent versions of the forms. Anyhow, the distress sale is something that we use where the lender's not going to go for it. Anyhow, you can take a look at those. So if you're going to be doing this, and right now, of all the different things you could do, this is probably not big. If you look at, I'm almost done with this. Let me just, all right, I'm going to skip to that. If you go into RPR and you search for pre-foreclosure properties in your area, and you can do a search within last 30 days, you're going to see a whole bunch of them, right? I mean, not compared to what we used to see, but still we're not talking about 5 or 6, right? 50 to 100 or whatever. The number of those that are actually short sales are maybe none. Right, but if you want to see what's going on, and if you were working in what's called the distress market, you might want to take the different courses. EXP has them, NAR has them. Learn about how banks deal with this. There's a difference between the asset manager of banks, that's REO divisions, and the risk management of the banks, which is all of this stuff, risk mitigation. And how all that works. If this is something that you're planning on as part of your, repertoire as a real estate agent, that's something you might want to spend some time on. And if interest rates go up, they go down now, right? I mean, we don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen next week, or next month, next year. We might see more of these. It's generally localized and for different kinds of properties. Just some stuff about if you want to search it. If you're thinking there's going to be a lot of these and you would really like to work on a team where the team leader has experience in short sales, bank-owned properties, and all of that, talk to me. So Melissa, what did I leave out, or
I think you did a great job.
that's why I keep inviting her to come to my class.
Uh, I think the next week, maybe part 2, how you do buyer side. This is like more seller side, and if someone wants to short sell properties, then what will be the steps or process?
Yeah, let's talk about that. Would you be willing to help?
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
Let's talk
whatever.
about whether or not that's going to be next week. But yeah. Right now, we're not doing a lot of short. How about this? Is there? Let's talk, because besides short sale, there's just the whole foreclosure. There's a lot more of that,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
What would the financing? What, if any, differences would there be? All right. Any other questions for anybody out there?
Yeah, hi, Michael. It's Neil Singerman. You mentioned about the different 90 days, 30 days, and so on, but it sounded, what I was listening to me, and maybe I took it incorrectly, was that we're there to help them save the home, most likely, but a lot of times we cannot save the home, and then it goes into the listing. Is that usually how it works, or not?
Yeah, it's a lot. They're much more interested in talking to you about ways in which they could save their house.
Okay. Okay.
But it won't take them very long to figure out that that's not going to work very well.
Okay, and I always thought that the notice of sale was there would be motivated to sell their home than if they're in the NOD or the prior one.
You would think so.
I would think so, but
You would think so, but people who get that far generally have issues.
Okay.
Right, and you look at, if you're interested in this subject and you don't have a social life, look at the upcoming auctions, the NODs. Right, RPR can do this, and then look after a while whether or not those same properties are still NODs. And the part that's weird is that a whole bunch of them are. Even though it said there was an auction, they were on the auction block last week, nothing happens. Nothing changes. Next month, still the same owner, nothing happens. 4 months later, they appear as again another notice of sale. So they talked them out of the auction, is essentially what I mean, we don't know for sure, but that would be a logical explanation. They got the lender to give them, please give me another couple of weeks. My uncle said he's going to wire me the money as soon as he sells his Winnebago. And they said, all right, we'll give you a couple more weeks. And they just didn't go through with it. And there's not a lot of communication about what's going on. Like there's zero communication about what's going on. So it's it gets very fuzzy about the notice of sale.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Michael, what is when an auction happens, the lender says that you receive a deed in lieu?
No,
What
that's
does
not
that mean?
that's not the auction. A deed in lieu is when you go to the lender and you say, look, I'm on the ropes. This is awful. It's horrible. There's absolutely no way I'm ever going to be able to make anything. Why don't we just do this? I'm going to deed you the house in lieu of you dragging me through the foreclosure process. Right? Here, you want it? Now, one of the reasons that lenders are reluctant to do that, if you look at this as a timeline, right? The first trust deed is the beginning of this. Maybe there's a second, maybe there's a mechanics lien, maybe there's all these other liens that occurred after the first. If the lender accepts a deed in lieu, that deed is effective when delivered, which means it takes effect as the day that it's given to the lender, which means all those liens from the past are still on the property. If the lender uses the first to foreclose, the first came first. So the first would wipe out all of the junior liens. So they're not even interested in talking about this if there's junior liens. And, but if there aren't a lot of junior liens and the lender doesn't, it's a short sale, and you look at no one's going to buy it. It's no way we're going to auction it for enough money. Why don't I just deed it to you? And then we'll call it all quits. They sometimes do that. That also has an effect on your credit, however, because it gets reported like, not as a good thing. Right? I could go on, but I won't. Let's see if the market changes. If it does, and this becomes a bigger thing, the website will be back.
What does that mean to a buyer when a property is being offered? I do see this, Michael, on auctions, where it says the buyer will receive a deed in lieu.
Now,
Is that the way that the lender transfers the property to a buyer?
no. I would have to see that one. Melissa, the only time I've ever heard deed in lieu being used is when it's a deed given by the borrower to the lender to stop the foreclosure.
Yeah, and honestly, I haven't seen the trustee's deed where the trustee, it's been a long time since I've seen one. But it would not, I know I've never seen it be called a deed in lieu.
Well, that wouldn't be a trustee's deed anyhow.
Well,
They
I was
generally
just
do not want to go to that point.
right.
I mean, they really do not. So, but the phrase "a deed in lieu" for a buyer at an auction doesn't make any sense to me. A deed in lieu is a borrower giving a deed to the lender if the lender will tear up the note and let him go.
That's what I always thought, Michael, but I do receive from auction.com and some other things where it says this. So next time I do, I'll screen capture it and shoot it to you.
And then I'll send it to ChatGPT and Gemini and copy their answer and just kidding. I'd like to see it because that's a new one for me. And Melissa, by the way, is with Chicago Title. And how long have you been shepherding escrows?
Oh, I don't know, it's 23 years, something like that.
You remember 2006?
I was there. I was there.
All right, that's enough. Don't be distressed.
Thank you, Michael. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.